Okay, well, welcome to our Cycle 1 CalTPA Review and Refresh. We are the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities with Teacher Education Programs, and we're offering these sessions to anyone and everyone across the state to just help with increasing the knowledge around the CalTPA. And today we're going to be focusing on an overview of Cycle 1. Every month we offer Cycle 1 on one month, Cycle 2 on the next month. So our next meeting will be focused on Cycle 2 on April 7th at 6 p.m. And we will be sending out information on that. If you were not able to make it to this session with us, we did have some technology difficulties. And so we had to pivot, change Zoom links, and we're recording it now to share out. We will be sharing this, and we apologize if you were not able to meet with us because of those tech difficulties. So I want to tell you that this is a team presentation, and Kelly and I are going to be hosting this. I'm going to be taking the lead. Kelly's going to be assisting with anything in the chat or any other questions, or jumping in if there's more details to share, because Kelly and I are both pretty knowledgeable with the CalTPA. I've been trained as an assessor for both multiple subject and single subject. I have helped support hundreds of candidates get through the CalTPA. I've worked with induction, our induction partners on better understanding the CalTPA and also their new teachers. And I've also worked with faculty to help faculty in different programs better understand the expectations of the CalTPA so then they can support their candidates. So today together, we are going to go through Cycle 1. Kelly, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Though I have not been officially calibrated as a CalTPA assessor, I've been through the training. We've participated in their pilot study years ago. And so familiar with all sorts of extensive on teaching performance assessment. And even back then when it originally started way back in Stanford, back in the late 1990s. So there you have it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we are going to be posting this recording on the CCTE YouTube and sending that out. And then we'll also link it to our CCTE website. Here is the link for that. Kelly, if you could copy and paste that into the chat, that would be great for anyone to have. So then you can find that later on. We'll have the slides and the recording linked there. So the overview of this workshop, we are going to be talking about resources. So what you have, your resources to do the best you can do and best understand CalTPA. We're going to give an overview of Cycle 1, and then we'll have some time for questions. So first things first, it's really important, and I emphasize this because I find that people really underestimate the power of the assessment guides. This is hands down your best resource. You need to read this. I've read it a million times. I feel like every time I read it, I still learn something more, even though I'm doing CalTPA daily. So just keep that in mind, that it's important that you really submerge yourself in the content. It tells you everything you have to do. It defines terms. It has rubrics. Those rubrics are exactly what the assessors are using to give you a score. So you know what they're looking for. And if you know that, you can really develop a strong submission so you can do well. And if you haven't done this already, this speaks to we're presenting to people at all levels. And so some people haven't logged into the CalTPA, others have. This is the link to do that. You go in there, go to the assessment tab, CalTPA, and you need to register. It costs $150 to register per cycle. And once you're registered, all the current templates and assessment guides are provided. So every year, the CalTPA gets updated every summer. So if you're working on it now and you don't get it submitted by, let's say, in July, that's typically when they switch over to the next version. If you go past then, you're going to have the new version and you're going to need to update your work and have the most current version templates and assessment guides so you can really, what they're expecting at that point. So once you register, then you have the most updated resources for you. And I think it's always important to keep the big picture in mind. There's all these details of what to do for the CalTPA. You got all these steps and all the stuff you need to do, but keep this big picture in mind as you're working. Cycle 1 is focused on planning a lesson that builds on the assets of your students. If you always have that in mind, you're going to do well. Always go back to that. This is about me developing a lesson that builds on the assets of my students. In cycle 2, it's a different focus. The big picture of cycle 2 is on assessment and analyzing assessment data. So for cycle 1, this is the lens that you want to approach all of your work through. And here, this is the graphic that the CalTPA uses. It applies to both cycle 1 and cycle 2. These are the steps. So the first step is plan. The second step is teach and assess. The third is to reflect, and then to apply is the fourth step. So you're going to have evidence that you need to show that you're planning, then you teach it, then you reflect on how that planning and teaching went, and then you apply it. Like, okay, now that I've planned it, I taught it, I reflected, now what would I do next? So that's the apply. And you're going to do the same thing for cycle 2 as well. It's organized in the same way. So now we're going to just go through the evidence for each of those steps. So I told you the first thing is to plan. So you're going to have getting to know your students. This is a template. So you have prompts and you're answering the prompts. It tells you exactly what it's looking for. And this is all about the assets of your student. What's their knowledge about the content? What are their interests? Cultural and linguistic resources. And also who are these students, especially your focus students? And we're going to go through that later about 3 focus students that you have to have. And you're basically in this template showing that you know exactly who your students are. You've taken the time to learn about them. And the reason for this is that you're going to next, for the lesson plan, design a lesson that builds upon who your students are. So you should see a connection between getting to know your students and your lesson plan. As you're writing your lesson plan, look back at that getting to know your students and write about it. So if your students have some sort of asset, every student has an asset, you need to include that you're designing the lesson to specifically build on that. And that's what the assessors want to see. So the lesson plan is what you're going to do in that lesson. Then you have a lesson plan rationale, and this is the why. So this is your rationale. Why did you design that lesson the way you did? And here's your little tip here. It should be because of the assets of your students. So that's your rationale, is building on those assets and helping students reach the learning goals. That's the big focus of your lesson plan design. So in that lesson plan rationale, you're explaining why you made the choices you did. Then you're going to provide instructional materials and resources. Now, these 3 have a template. This last one, there's no template. It just can't be more than 8 pages. So you're putting together everything you need to teach. This might include PowerPoints, handouts, maybe it's a video that you showed in the class, but you're not going to ever do hyperlinks. No hyperlinks in anything, because an assessor is not going to click a link to go outside of the scoring system to look at that. So what you can do instead is maybe you can describe the video. You can also do a screenshot of the video and then a little text below it explaining it, or headline saying, okay, this is the video I showed. Here's, the cover, and give a little about it. And it's also good to link to the standards or your learning goals as well. And so there's no exact format to do this. It's your choice. And Kelly, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, we're talking with regards to step 2 with the video clips. As I
No.
was typing.
Oh, sorry. No, step 1
Okay.
with the instructional materials.
Thank
And
you.
then, yeah.
So for the instructional materials, I also advise my students, don't put hyperlinks in your Pearson platform. Take a PDF, screenshot, anything, and upload that instead. It's best to have a direct attachment.
Yeah, an assessor, just know the assessor will not click links. So it's useless to do that. Okay, so now moving on to step 2, teach and assess. These are your video clips. So you're going to teach your entire lesson. You're going to video the entire thing. You're not going to do small recordings. You record the entire thing. And the reason is you want to have the most option as possible. So you're going to, from that larger recording, choose 3 clips out of there that are up to 5 minutes long. So you're going to do that. And the clip 1 is about positive classroom environment and expectations for learning. Clip 2 is engaging students in activities. And then step 3 is the next steps for learning. And we are going to go through each one of those video clips in more detail so you know exactly what is expected. And then there's annotations. Annotations are time-stamped comments. So they're comments about an exact point in time in those videos. And there are 5 titles that you have to use. So the title is just the focus of that annotation. And you have to use each title at least once across the 3 video clips. Most likely, you're going to use it multiple times. You're not just going to be using it one time. That's the bare minimum. And I always recommend 2 to 3 really strong annotations that align with the 2 rubrics that are in the assessment guide. If they're strong and they're aligned with the rubrics, you're going to do well. If you have a million annotations, all it's going to do is distract the assessor, and the assessor is going to have to really search, okay, where they're looking for specific things. And now you're just inundating them with all of these annotations. It's better to just have a few really strong, clean ones that are exactly what the assessor is looking for. And we're going to go into more detail about that. But Kelly, yeah?
Yeah, so, and I'd like to also add on with what Allison just said. With those 2 to 3 strong annotations, when you timestamp them, make sure that you focus on a particular moment and not timestamp the entire clip, because that again is a distraction for the assessors. They would be looking through the entire 5-minute clip instead of the particular moment in that clip that really illustrates one of the annotation titles that you're referring to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you also don't want to say what is exactly happening. You want to explain why and contextualize what is happening, because an assessor has eyes. They're looking, they can see it. your annotations an opportunity to really explain what's happening and to show that at this point, this is what's happening and this is exactly what you're looking for. Here it is. It's like waving a flag and highlighting, look here, assessor, this is where this is happening. So you can get that higher score. Okay. Now moving on to step 3. For the evidence, you're going to do a written narrative with a reflection of what you have learned. So this, we'll go into detail, but this is a reflection. Always think I'm reflecting on how I did with planning and teaching and how the students did. It is a 3-page template. So you've got prompts, you're not staring at a blank page wondering, okay, now I'm going to do a reflection essay. It tells you exactly what you need to reflect upon. And it's not too intense, but it really needs to be strong reflection. And then we go to step 4, which is apply. This is either a narrative, like in writing, or you can answer in a video about how you will apply what you learned to the future lessons. So it also is a 3-page template with prompts, tells you exactly what it's looking for. You can write it out. You can do a video. You can stop your video. This is one you can edit. So if you messed up what you were saying, you could edit that out and have a video response to this template instead of writing. It's up to you. I think most people decide to do writing, but the video I think is fabulous as well. So think about what you feel most comfortable with. Okay, so my next big tip, I want you all to be successful. So I'm providing tips and tricks. Rubrics, second best resource, your rubrics that are located in the assessment guide, which is your #1 best resource. This is the second. Within that assessment guide, you have your rubrics. There are 8 rubrics in cycle 1. They are exactly what assessors use to score you. It's very transparent. They are looking for specific things. They're going to look at your work. Do I find this? Yes or no? And then they go on. So you really want to know what you're being scored upon. You should read it before you start writing, while you are writing to make sure you're on the right track. And after you're done with everything, you should take the role as the assessor and assess your own work. Go through and see, do I have this? Do I have this? And if it's not obvious to you, it certainly won't be obvious to an assessor. So it's a really good way to check your own work instead of having wonderings, is this what they're looking for? If you use the rubrics, you'll know. And we'll go through how to look and use the rubric. So in cycle 1, you need to score 19 or more to pass with only 1 score of a 1. So even if you had over 19, if you had more than 1 score of a 1, you wouldn't pass. So keep that in mind. Your goal is to get a 3, 4, or 5 on each rubric. So when you look at a rubric, they have level 1, 2, 3, and 4. You want to avoid everything in level 1 and 2. It's worth a read in the level 1 and 2 for every rubric, so you know everything to avoid. This is not what I want to be seen in my work. And then you go to level 3. If you get a level 3 on all of the rubrics, you're going to pass and you'll do fine. So a nice goal is to go first to the level 3 and get everything accomplished that's on that for each of the rubrics. You get a different score for each rubric. The assessor, when they're scoring, their first thing is to go to level 3 as well. So they're going to go through that and determine if you have everything in level 3. And if you do, then they Then they'll decide, well, do you also have everything in level 4? And then if you do, then do you also have everything in level 5? You can't skip a level. They go up that way. At that level 3, if it's not clear and you don't have level 3, then you're going to go down to a level 2, and you could also go down to a level 1. So keep that in mind and use the rubric. Don't just wing this and throw something together and submit it. Really think about what you're doing. You want to do this once and you want to pass. So spending the time to look at that, all of the rubrics is really going to set you up for success. So each rubric is framed by an essential question. And this is the list of the essential questions. This is straight out of your assessment guide. So if you read your assessment guide, you'll see this. And I think it's important to point out the essential questions so you know, like, the essence of each rubric. What is it really looking for? So it frames it. So it's good to set yourself, okay, rubric 1.1. How does the candidate's proposed learning goals connect with students' prior knowledge? So you know you need to make an obvious connection between the learning goals of this lesson and the prior knowledge. And you write out the prior knowledge in the getting to know your students. You write that out. And then in your lesson plan and your lesson plan rationale, you would want to write something that's saying, building on the prior knowledge of X, Y, and Z of these students, this lesson is going to focus on blah, blah, blah. That's a very good way to set yourself up that you are building on that. That's what they're going to be looking for. And then, how do proposed learning activities, instructional strategies, and grouping strategies support, engage, and challenge all students to meet the learning goals? So really dissect this. Okay, so in your writing, you're really going to need to show how you're, one, supporting, also what's engaging, and then also how are you challenging? And everything needs to be linked back to the progress toward meeting the learning goals. The learning goals need to be at the heart of everything that you're doing. So this is a way, looking at these essential questions really gets you in that mindset of how to write for the CalTPA. Also worth noting, strategically, if I'm looking at this for my overall score, there are 4 rubrics on planning. This has a heavy emphasis on plan. Half your score is from the planning. Half your score is from the other. 2 from the teaching and assessing, that's your videos and your annotations. 1 from reflect, 1 from apply. Those are all important, but wow, that planning really needs a lot of attention. You want to make sure you've got a good plan. And I've talked about these rubrics, but now I'm going to do a walkthrough with the visual so you really understand how to navigate these rubrics. Here's that essential question at the top. Every rubric has one, and it's always located on the top. Here you see the different levels. The first level you want to always go to is level 3. That's the expectation, basically. Level 4 is great. Level 5 is like a unicorn. Doesn't happen all the time. Pretty rare, unbelievable to some, but it can happen. It can happen. I've supported candidates getting 4s and 5s on all of their rubric scores, which has been amazing. But if you get 3, you really should be proud of yourself. A 3 is still good. And then level 1 and 2, these are the no-goes. Don't do this. That's a big red X. Don't, nothing like this. So each of these little paragraphs or sentences chunked are called constructs. And so you want to go through each construct and make sure you have them. If you are missing one construct, you cannot score a level 3. You have to have proof of every single one of these. So you're going to navigate through there and look through your work and make sure that you have that and it's evident and clear. Sources of evidence. So this was on the second page, so I just cut and pasted it here so it would be more visibly appealing for this presentation. But when you look at this in the assessment guide, the sources of evidence it's going to be right below the rubric. And this is telling you that the assessor, to score you on this one rubric, is going to look at these 4 documents to give you a score. So these can be evident in any of those. Most of them I find in the lesson plan rationale. The rationale has most of these constructs, or you can write to most of them in one spot. But they're going to be searching out, and assessors want you to do well. I want you to know that they want to find what they're looking for, and they search as much as they can. But if they can't find it, then they can't give you that level 3. Some ways to make it really obvious to an assessor, you can do bold. So you can bold or underline certain words or phrases. And I like to recommend to do that for things that align with each of these constructs. So you would pick out certain words in here, and the part in your evidence that matches, you might want to bold. Don't want to overdo it, because I mean, just like we learn with highlighting, when you're learning to highlight text, if you end up highlighting everything, it really doesn't help you. So just be sure to use it strategically. And Kelly, did you want to add anything?
One additional tip that I do with my students is for them to really practice through going through the rubrics is go through level 3 and actually serve each construct with a check mark. So it'd be like a checklist. And what they can do is when they go through their sources of evidence, in this case, parts A through D, look through there and see where can they identify in the sources of evidence that qualifies for that construct. And if they can, then, check it off. And if they want to, they can even put the source of evidence next to it as a reminder where it's located at. That's one thing that I recommend. And the second thing is then also, particularly for level 1, use each of those as bullet points as to what to stay away from. But if you want to go through the exercise of checking through your written documents and seeing how it might match up to the constructs of level 3, then use it as an activity, as a checklist.
Absolutely. I mean, they're giving you on a silver platter exactly what they want. So take the time to do that. Absolutely, check marks, going through your stuff. That's you put on that hat of assessor and check your own work. Okay, so now we are going to go into detail and unpack each step to prepare for the cycle 1. So for step 1, the first thing you're going to do is research who your students are. You're going to get to know them. You're going to get to know their test scores, home life, past experiences with the content that you're teaching. And some people do this with conversation, surveys, sometimes asking other teachers if they've had maybe counselors, if they are a student with special need, maybe the education specialists that are working with them, the English language department, however it's structured in your school, really take the time to reach out to get to know who the students are in your class. And when you write about your students, it's about your students. It's not about the community at large. It's about your students and their experience in the community and home life. Shouldn't be about, I sometimes see people writing generalized statements about the school and the community, but then it never gets really to who their students are. And you need to write about your exact students in the exact class that you're going to be teaching that one lesson. So after you get to know them, you're going to build on who they are. You're going to make connections to their interest and their prior knowledge and their English language levels. You're going to do that and build and design one lesson. Then you're going to explain in the rationale why you made the lesson plan the way you did. You're rationalizing and explaining everything. We don't design lessons just for anybody, just for the fun of it. It has to be purposeful. There has to be a reason. So going and getting a lesson online, going to like Teachers Pay Teachers, and you found this great lesson, and you're just going to copy and paste it and put it in here as the lesson for CalTPA, it's not going to work. You can be inspired by lessons you find online, but you really need to personalize it to the exact students who are in your class and justify how you're building on the assets of those students. All of your students are coming to you with so many experiences and resources and abilities that you have an opportunity to really get them engaged and doing beautifully in your class if you build on those things. I know my son is in 4th grade, and when the teacher talks about things he's interested in, like he likes games like Fortnite, if she can just somehow get Fortnite into one of her lessons as an example, or it's based on that. He also likes imposter. And so these are things that if the teacher can build on that, he is so engaged and he wants to do really well. He comes home and he tells me all about it. That's what you want to do with your students. And it's not just about video games, but also where you come from, your culture at home, and bringing that into the classroom and in really developing lessons that include information and experiences from your students.
Can I add something?
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
With what Allison said too, be very mindful in the language of your lesson plan and your rationale, that it is not a deficit language. In other words, stating what the students lack, and therefore you're putting this lesson plan to help fill those deficits. You really want to turn it on its head and make the focus and the culture, the emphasis of your language as a positive base or asset-based learning. What the students' strengths are, what their interests are, what their assets are that they're bringing into the classroom, and that you as the teacher are making connections to that with the particular lesson plan. So that way there is engagement and continuity in the learning. But remember, it's not deficit-based, it's asset-based. So you want your language to reflect that.
Great points. This comes up a lot. And when I work with some candidates, we have to work to translate and put it on its head, totally switch what the focus is. It's not what they don't have. If you find yourself writing and the first sentence is something about what the student can't do, doesn't know, okay, that's a check for yourself. That's deficit language. Instead, switch that to a positive. One example is, instead of writing, this student struggles, you could write, this student needs more support in this, whatever it is. Instead of they struggle with, they just need additional support to meet the learning goal. And taking that positive tone with it, and really that's what good teaching is. It's not looking for what students don't have, it's building on what they do have. And every student comes with knowing and having these experiences that you can build on. And that's one of the things that I love about the CalTPA is that that's central to it. If you can't see the assets in your students, you won't become a teacher. You really need to practice this and really engage with that. And that's what I would want to see in every teacher. It's what I would want to see in the teacher of my own son. So that being included in the CalTPA is something that I really respect. So you're going to build this great lesson, building on everybody's, all of your students' assets, and then you're going to gather all the materials and resources needed to teach the lesson. So this is your handouts, your PowerPoints, your videos, textbooks, any books you're reading with the class, if that's what you're doing. Those are all the materials and resources that you've put together. And you'll put it in one document, up to 8 pages. And you're just putting basically in screenshots, PDFs all together of these items. And no hyperlinks as a reminder. Also part of step 1 is having 3 focus students. And this is just you showing that you can meet the diverse needs of your students. As a teacher, you are going to have students like these focus students every year. So you really need to show that you're able to support them. FS1 is an English language learner. So their primary language is one other than English. They're probably identified by the home language survey. So that's how you can see if they're an English learner. And they lack clearly defined English language skills in listening, comprehension, speaking, reading, and or writing. So the LPAC scores are going to inform what you're writing about and how your understanding of your English language learner for their levels. If you don't have anybody identified as an English language learner, it would be someone like this last bullet point, lacking clearly defined English language skills. This we find in the lower grades sometimes, or the less diverse areas. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Kelly, because some people come across they're teaching in a class with no ELLs.
Right.
But you can't get out of it. It can't say NA. That doesn't work.
Yeah, that actually does in cycle 2. If you have, no such English language learners. Is a standard English learner also a situation here too?
They would qualify because their English language skills are needing additional support. So yes, if you have a standard English learner, and just for clarification, because also I find that a lot of people don't truly understand a standard English learner. This is someone who speaks a non-standard form of English at home. So examples of that would be like Hawaiian Pidgin, African American Vernacular, Jamaican Patois. Do you know some other examples, Kelly? Those just came off.
Singaporean English. That's another, or Singaporean Pidgin. That's another form of vernacular English that isn't considered standard English.
Yeah. So you can choose them for focus student 1 if you don't have an English language learner. It's always easier to have an English language learner because you can support everything with the LPAC scores and really base everything that you're doing on those scores, in addition to the other assets that they have. But that's the easiest way to go. FS2 is a student with either an IEP, a 504, or GATE. So they should have, and if they have an IEP, you need to really look at that and look at the goals and include that in your writing, and the accommodations. You're also going to want to write that down. You'll want to explain the disability, and it prompts you through that, and you explain who your student is. And then FS3 is a student with life experiences. And this is sometimes troubling for people because it's not a designation, right? So ELL is a designation. IEP 504 GATE, that's a designation. You've got some data. Life experience is, I think, very important that they have that as a focus student because it's not designated, but these are students who really need additional supports and care so they can be successful in the classroom. So you're going to choose a student who has life experiences that have impacted their academics, or they need additional emotional support in class. So it might be students who are withdrawn, who are acting out, who are not achieving to the level that they should be or could be doing. They have challenges at home or in the community or in school. It could be bullying, divorce, trauma, homelessness, poverty, and the list goes on. Be sure that you choose someone who has a life experience that's actually impacting how they are doing in school. So for instance, if you have a student whose parents are going through a divorce, but there is zero impact on their academics and they're not having any emotional issues, they're handling it fine, just because the parents are going through a divorce would not qualify them for FS3. There needs to be some kind of impact that's happening in the classroom or in school in general. Kelly, did you want to add anything to the focus students?
No, I think that's totally right on. So
researching your students, as I said, the LPAC scores, definitely go and look at that. I don't have on here, but IEPs, 504s, all of that, achievement in previous units, courses, grades as they connect to the content. So you need to write about their content knowledge. What do they already know? What do they know that's prepared them to be able to engage in this lesson? You wouldn't just throw whatever lesson you've planned on anybody. It needs to be developmentally appropriate that they have some base knowledge so they can actually understand what you're talking about in the class or in that lesson. So what is that base knowledge and how did they do? So you would want to talk about previous courses and units and lessons that they've done. And then you can do this with the student survey. You can find out about their families' previous assignments that you might have done at the beginning of the school year. That sometimes helps. So take the time to really research who your students are. Don't just throw this together and think that you can wing it. Everything needs to be built on who they are. So it's pretty obvious when people write a lesson plan that's not built on who their students are. It's pretty clear right away when I'm reading, and I'm sure Kelly can attest to this, you don't really know your students. This is an out-of-the-box lesson that you're just kind of putting on these students, and has nothing to do with who they are. Okay, so now you've planned, you got to know your students, you planned this fabulous lesson. Now you got to teach it. So there are 2 rubrics with TeachAssess. So you are going to teach your one lesson, and you want to make sure that you've got everything in that video or in those videos that align with the two rubrics. It is really important that you look at those before you actually teach it, so you know what you have to do. Sometimes this is one of the biggest things. Someone teaches a great lesson, but at the end, they don't say the next steps for content learning, right? Like they've taught this lesson, and at the end, what should be there is, building on what we just learned, tomorrow, we are going to extend our learning and we're going to do X, Y, and Z based on the content. If you don't say that, you're going to get probably a 1. So just that one little thing that was missed, you can't get higher than a 1. So knowing that, and it's not negotiable. It's not like the assessor's going to say, oh, this was a fabulous lesson, we'll just let that one go. You didn't have something that was required, and it's not there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Can I
Mhm.
say that is that what Allison's saying, it's literally in rubric 1.6. A 1 is listed when the candidate does not state what next steps of the lesson are. And so those are the things that you definitely want to try to avoid in your actual video clips. Similarly, if you have the video clip where you don't state what was prior learning or what happened in the previous day, with what's going to be the objectives or what's going to happen today, that can also constitute as a 1, because the purpose of this is to show continuity of this particular lesson in the midst of a bigger thing that's going on in the progress of this class based on students' assets. It can't be something that's totally out of context. It's all have to be part of the learning that's going on in general for that week or that time frame.
Exactly. So those are things, that's just one more thing that if you miss it, you're getting a 1. So don't miss these things. Go to what I suggested and said, your second best tool is to look at the rubrics. So for step 2, you're going to teach your one lesson. You're going to video record the entire thing. You're not going to do small clips. Sometimes people just want to do little recordings. No, record the whole thing. Then you have more to choose from to make sure you get exactly what's required within those up to 5 minutes clips. So you're going to go through the entire thing and choose out 3 video clips that meet the requirements for video clip 1, 2, and 3. They need to be up to 5 minutes. And know that the assessor doesn't care about the length within that 5 minutes. It can't go over, but if you can show everything they're looking for in 3 minutes, that's fine. They don't care. They're not going to say, wow, this clip is 3 minutes. I don't know. No, they don't. They literally do not care about the length. So you just can't go over 5 minutes. That's the only part that you need to pay attention to. And then each video clip should have 2 to 3 strong annotations, and you have to use the 5 titles at least once. But as we said before, you're probably going to use them multiple times in each video clip. You're not going to use all of them in each one, but there's going to be some overlap. And then make sure you and your students are visible. This is a condition code. If you and your students aren't visible, you won't even get a score. They're going to say this doesn't even, it's not even worth scoring at this point because there's no students or you're not visible. So keep that in mind. It's very important.
And it's really a minimum number of students. So if you, let's say if you were able to capture, a certain part of the classroom because of the width of your video angle, and there's some people here that weren't in the frame, that's okay. What Allison's saying is if there's no student there at any time during the video clip, and you, the teacher, are nowhere to be seen at any moment in the video clip.
Right, exactly. I've had candidates have the camera just on them, of them teaching. That's not what they're looking for. Um, or just on the students and no teacher, that's not what they're looking for. And you can show like a body part is fine. So if it's, the back of a head, that's okay. It doesn't need to be faces. It just has to be obvious that it's real students in your class and it's you. So these are the 3 video clips. The first one is creating a positive and safe learning environment for your students, connecting to prior learning, and establishing expectations for content-specific learning. That sounds like a lot, doesn't it? That's a big chunk of things you have to do in 5 minutes. But guess what? This is what it's going to look like. It's not as scary as it sounds. So we're going to just break this down, creating a positive and safe learning environment. So you're welcoming your students, they're coming in, or you're talking with them, depending on what level. If you're the younger grades, maybe you're having some time on the rug and talking with everyone. Maybe, the older students in high school, maybe you're just having some nice dialogue back and forth, asking them about their day, doing some SEL check-in, these kind of things. That's setting the positive learning environment. Then you go in, connect to prior learning. Hey, remember yesterday when we were working on and studying XYZ? Well, today, so this is expectations, connecting to prior learning, and then setting the expectations. Today, we're going to build on that, whatever we learned yesterday. You would put that in the details. And today, you are all going to learn X, Y, and Z. We're going to do this and that. And you're going to explain what the lesson is for the day. That's it. So it's doable, but just make sure that you know that you have to do that within the 5 minutes. So you're greeting them, you're having some dialogue. Hey, this is what we did yesterday. Remember that. Building on that, today we're going to do, and then explain what the lesson is. So that's basically it. Then clip 2, students' activities and your instructional strategies. So this is the students engaging in the activity that you're doing. So I really suggest it's something interactive. It should not be a lesson where you're doing direct instruction the whole time, where it's just you talking at students. That's not appropriate for the CalTPA. There are times when that's needed. This is not the time to showcase your direct instruction skills. This is you facilitating learning and having students in activities that are engaging, that are built on their assets, and really get them into that higher order thinking where they're really grappling with whatever the topic is. So this clip is them working on it. It might be you monitoring, going through the classroom, answering questions, facilitating some kind of part of the activity. So that's kind of what that clip looks like. Typically in the middle of your lesson. Clip 1's the beginning. Then clip 3, next steps for students' content-specific learning. So this is going to be toward the end, and you would be saying, hey, summarizing today, we did X, Y, and Z, summarize what happened in the lesson. And then building on what we did today, tomorrow, when we get back together, we're going to build on this. And then we're going to do, and then you'll explain. And it has to be content specific. So next steps for learning is not, okay, we're going to pack up our bags and the next thing we're going to go to specials and you're going to have PE, or you're going to be going to your next class, or it's lunchtime next. That's our next steps. That's not next steps for learning. It has to be content specific. So you need to explain how the next lesson builds on the content of this one lesson that you designed for the CalTPA. So that's what each clip looks like. It's, once you understand and just break it down, it's not as scary as it seems at first.
And if this doesn't mean that it happens all the time, but typically, or in most of the cases I've seen, an ideal clip one, you typically in the beginning of your lesson. If you want to look kind of sequentially where this would be placed to get an idea, clip two somewhere in the middle of your lesson, where there are students doing a lot of the talking, a lot of the doing, and the kind of doing the kind of engagement that your students are doing really invokes higher order thinking skills. And then clip three, an ideal clip three would be sometime towards the end of the lesson, where you're having the recap of what's happened today, and then stating what next steps would be for next time.
Okay, so now you planned a fabulous lesson, you taught that lesson, now it's time to reflect. And this is just good teaching. You should reflect. I'm always reflecting. I will reflect after this workshop. I'm going to reflect on how this went, just because it's ingrained in me that you always think about it afterward and how, the good, the bad, what would I do differently? What would I do the same? How did it go? So that reflection is really important, and you need to show that you can be reflective. Make sure when you're writing the reflection that it's not just restating what happened. So you're not just going to say, this is what happened. You need to be reflective, really think about it. How did it go? That planning process, and then the teaching. How did the students do? How did I do? What could I do the same and differently? What would better support students to meet the learning goals or exceed the learning goals? And then you're going to write from that lens. Always make sure you're in that lens and really digging deep into how it went. And you also need to make reference and cite steps 1 and 2, the planning and the teaching, and be specific. Don't just say, just like this would be a bad example if you're, as I stated in getting to know your students, and then just have a broad statement. You want to be a little more specific about your exact students, what you exactly did in that planning, or the teaching, or the specific moment. So it might be like in clip 2, whatever point, this is what was happening. And so you just want to cite it and be specific about what was happening. And that shows that you are being reflective. Don't throw in, really windy, verbose, flowery statements. You're not writing an essay. You're not writing a book. You are answering the prompts. You need to be thorough, but you also need to be specific and direct. So just keep that in mind, that oftentimes I would say a lot of times when I read candidates' work, they have what I call throwaway sentences. It doesn't really tell me anything. I'm kind of just reading through, okay, when are they going to get to the point? And those throwaway sentences are pretty distracting and really make it feel that you're not really doing the work and reflecting and engaging deeply as is expected with the CalTPA. So in your writing, just really try to get to that direct, specific point. And then finally, step 4, apply. You planned a fabulous lesson, you taught this fabulous lesson, you reflected, it could have gone great, could have not. There's areas where you would do again, or areas you would do differently. Now you're writing about, you reflected on it. Now, what exactly would you do next? And that's what you're going to write about here. So everything needs to be based on what you learned about teaching that lesson and planning it, and through your reflection, what you would do next. You're not just going to say, well, the next unit is XYZ, so that's why we're going to it. It needs to be based on how the learning went. How did your students do? How did you do? It shouldn't just be, we're moving on, because what if the students didn't do well? We're not going to leave all of them behind and just move on to the next topic and then they're left behind. You might need to reteach some parts. You might need to extend it. Maybe everybody got it. And so extend the learning. They need that higher order thinking and deeper understanding if they're ready for it. So, and here again, you need to reference and cite steps 1, 2, and 3. Citing is required, and it's not like a citation for APA in a paper. This is just referencing specific points in steps 1, 2, and 3 in your writing to support your statements so they aren't throwaway sentences. Okay, so you've gotten through all of that, and when you're done writing, promise me you will do this. This is for you. Remember, this is your CalTPA, your submission. You are your best advocate, your best double checker. You are the most invested in how you do. So when you are done writing, check your work by using those rubrics in the assessment guide. So you are going to try to find those constructs in level 3, 4, and 5 in your work. I always recommend shoot for the 5. Try to get it. Go for it. If you don't reach the 5, it's more likely you're going to get the 4 or the 3. And it's less likely you're going to get those 1 and 2. So try for it all. And then make sure nothing from levels 1 and 2 are evident in your writing. And if you can't find the evidence required in level 3, you clearly need to revise your work. You need to revise your writing. And it's an iterative process. It's not your first draft that you're going to submit to Pearson. If it is your first draft, you probably will not do well. You could, but it's highly unlikely. So just know it's a process of revisions. Do this for all 8 rubrics, every single one. Be really thorough. You want to do this one time and pass it. You don't want to have to pay extra money. You want to just get this off your list of to-dos. Show the great educator that you are and be recommended for that teaching credential or clear your credential wherever you're at in the process. And then once you're done reviewing with the rubrics and revising, then you're ready to submit your work to Pearson. And we put together this little roadmap to just give you a visual now that you've learned about all the pieces. Well, how does it all fit together? Here's the roadmap. So first, get to know your students. That's your first thing to do. Then develop an engaging lesson based on what you learned about your students. Remember, there's got to be connection. Then video record yourself teaching the lesson. Choose 3 video clips from that lesson that are up to 5 minutes long and meet the requirements. The requirements are in the rubric, so you always look back at that. Then reflect on what you learned from teaching that lesson. Then apply what you learned to next steps for learning. And then revise your writing using the rubrics in the assessment guide, then submit cycle 1 to Pearson. So that's the roadmap for completing cycle 1. And now we are going to open it up for any questions. Kelly, I don't know if you wanted to add anything before we open it up for questions.
No, I think this was really well said. It will, I guess, look forward to our online audience that unfortunately weren't able to make it here, that they can watch this to see the big picture as well as the roadmap. So thank you, Allison.
Thank you. Okay, so for those who are here, do you have questions about cycle 1 at all? We're happy to answer anything and everything.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know for for part 2 or clip 2 of the videos is to show kind of an example of like when you're teaching someone and like them participating in the activity. Like I'm a PE teacher, and so mine's a lot of like modeling and a lot of group work and a lot of walking around the different stations and modeling for those different people and showing them how to do certain exercises or events. My question was for clip 2, is it okay that I edit clips together to make a 5-minute clip? So like I had stations or no? Okay.
No.
Okay.
So you're not allowed to edit the video. So
Okay.
the up to 5 minutes needs to be continuous and unedited. So
Okay.
that means, and that's a good point that we
You
didn't bring up, that it's good to clarify. You can't add music, you can't add
yeah.
cool like titles and headers. You can't clip out certain parts that aren't important, or compile a bunch of great clips into one clip that's up to 5 minutes. And
Okay.
yeah, for PE, it's often that maybe you're modeling and then they're doing. It depends on what your lesson is. I would definitely choose for PE a standard that lends itself to higher order thinking. Oftentimes people don't choose a standard that aligns with higher order thinking, and then you kind of set yourself up for a lot of struggle to get to that higher order thinking. So you can set yourself up for success by choosing a standard that you can get them to that higher order thinking.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if I can just add to that, Justin, what Allison is referring to with the higher order thinking in PE, if you want to look, for example, in Bloom's taxonomy, they have Bloom's taxonomy for cognitive skills as well as psychomotor skills. You can look under the psychomotor skills and see what would be in alignment to your PE lesson.
That's great advice. Absolutely.
Thank you. I'll tell you about my lesson plan in class later tonight, so we'll discuss it then.
Wonderful. Okay, so if you have more questions, just you've got Kelly here, and just let us know. We are going to post this video on the CCTE YouTube channel. You can comment there and we'll engage. We also have a Facebook page for AICCU-ED. You can find us there, and that's open to students, faculty, new teachers, anyone. We share resources across the state that help teachers and faculty really engage in all of these big topics in teacher education. So thank you for joining us and have a good night.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.